What's that? Oh, no, it's in, I put it, it's not on my chair.
This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
Thank you for joining us today. With me is Richard Field and John Cameron, as usual. And gentlemen, what is not usual is our rates of inflation. The shadow stats, John Williams, sorry, I was actually about to say Juan Williams, not the same person. Inflation is now really at 13.5%, which means that as Richard, you pointed out behind the show, that means that our increase in sales is not real.
Yeah, no. I mean, the Yahoo story said that the sales of Christmas season sales are up 8-point-something%. And if you even compare it to the officially reported CPI of 6.8%, last I looked, it's still a minuscule increase in sales, considering that we've come off, a very slow period for sales. But if you look at the actual rate of inflation as measured the way that it was measured before they started fiddling with the CPI back in the 90s, and John Williams at Shadow Stats keeps track of that, it would actually be about 13.5% and rising. And if you look at the producer price index, which everybody's ignoring right now, that's something in the neighborhood of 41%. I forget exactly what it is, but producer prices are what go up before consumer prices do. It's the inputs. So we're looking at what's actually probably a sales decrease over the Christmas season, as opposed to the happy face reported increase by mainstream news sources. And that's boding very, very poorly for any incumbent politician, particularly any majority incumbent politician, read Democrat, for next year. And that's just the way it is. Something they can run from, but they can't hide from, and they'll try to. We've already seen Biden try to blame greedy oil companies and greedy whatever for raising their prices, when inflation just shows up wherever the greatest shortage is. And because Biden was shutting down drilling and shutting down oil supplies in every possible way he could think of, that's where supply was constrained first. So oil prices went up first. Great. Now I can blame the oil companies for inflation. It's the same scam that we saw back in the 1970s when Walter Cronkite came on the news every night and said, Exxon, or whoever the big oil company at the time was, had a record profit. Tut. Seeing the same, it's the same play, different act.
Well, I think we should give equal time to politicians and give them credit for having a record profit. But it's not really profit, and I'd love to see greedy politicians who are grabbing more and more power and more of the economy be blamed for the mess that centralized planning always comes up with. I mean, it's great. Centralized planning is great if you want to starve Ukrainians or starve Uyghurs, which isn't how you say it. I should learn how to say their name. But, if you want to get anything done, decentralization and laissez-faire is always proven the best, always will. So, I think this rests with who has caused this problem.
Well, this is a direct result of the manipulation of the money supply, right? There's so much now money. And then you've not just the manipulation of the money supply, they've manipulated the economy through, not just through regulations, through supply chain disruptions, by dictate. And now so now we're wondering that the inflation and the economies aren't working properly. Well, no kidding. You've overregulated it. You've shut down the supply chains. You've disrupted the labor market. You've disrupted the money supply market. Adding to it all the disruptions of the housing supply market and all the various other markets that the government has deliberately manipulated, and none of it works anymore. And why are we surprised? But of course, the politicians who are responsible for it want to blame somebody else. We'll blame the oil companies. We'll blame other people's greed, but we never blame the government's greed. And that's
and the mainstream media just plays along and says, hear no evil, see no evil when it comes to politicians. But when it comes to private enterprise, it's all evil. And keep in mind that you're talking about manipulation of the money supply. Well, it goes beyond mere manipulation. We're talking about a third of all of the money that's ever been created by the Federal Reserve. And I could be off by 10 or 15% on that 1/3. I'm not sure exactly, but a huge percentage of the money ever created since the Federal Reserve came into being in, over a century ago, was created in the last couple of years. It's absolutely stupendously stupid on the part of the Fed and totally predictable that we get inflation. You can only lower the velocity of money, the speed with which money moves between one person and another person, by so much. Its velocity has been going down for the last 20-something years, leading to asset inflation instead of consumer price inflation. That can only last so long, and it's come to an end.
And then I think there's, being the cynic that I am, a deeper underlying agenda. And that's, the government does things to screw it up, then blames somebody else and assumes more control in order to fix what they've done to screw it up, which they blamed on somebody else, and on and on and on and on. And, it's going to keep happening. Just like, the energy problem we have in this country is because the Greens spend about $1 billion a year on anti-nuclear propaganda and pro quote unquote renewable energy propaganda, and eventually you get to the point where there's not enough energy, and the only way to fix it is a nice carbonless nuclear power. But until some more people like Buffett and Gates get together and privately finance some nice clean nuclear plants, it's still going to be a problem. I myself am against this agenda because I like birds, and as I like to point out weekly, if I can, before you guys start muting my mic, just Altamont Pass, one location has killed 1,000 golden eagles. I'm done.
Yeah. Well, and we'll move on. We'll talk about breaking things. Senator Ben Cardin, of discussing the new version of the Build Back Better bill, he said a lot of us are going to be disappointed. And I guess the question is, who is us? Who's this us he's talking about? I'm not disappointed if this Build Back Better bill dies a slow and painful death. I'd be really happy for it to do that. So when they talk about who is us, who is this us they're referring to?
Whoever is on the receiving end, the first row of receivers of the government read us, large S from taxpayers and inflation taxpayers, because inflation is just another tax in effect. So the people who in the defense industry, the people who are the recipients of Medicare, Medi-Cal, Social Security, etc., those are the us that he's referring to. They're the people who get government spending first. They benefit from it. Everybody else loses.
And then also the states that get these clowns elected, i.e. New York and California, benefit because of the twisty changes to tax laws that benefit very wealthy people. Maybe not the billionaires, but the rest of the wealthy people that give the money to these socialists so they can keep getting elected and keep doing this tomfoolery. So they're without the basically government grant to wealthy white taxpayers who fund the Democratic Party, they wouldn't be getting people elected, and they're the first people that benefit from all these things, or maybe the second. Richard pointed out who the first one.
Yeah, well, I think when they're talking us, as we pointed out, it's the grifting class, it's the grifter class, but it's also the vote blue no matter who crowd, right? That's who they're talking to. That's who this Build Back Better plan is actually aimed at. It's not aimed at average voters. It's aimed at the vote blue no matter who crowd, that they're paying off their loyalty. And that's kind of, I think, ultimately what a lot of these policies are actually about. They're not actually about making our lives better. They're about, paying their grifters. But speaking about politicians and the government just completely wasting money, In the Bay Area, there's a short story here. The Bay Area, the CHP brought in a helicopter to catch a bicyclist who ran a red light.
At 3 o'clock in the morning, like he, was really causing a huge traffic hazard by running that red light. Of course, I mean, the real reason is because, hey, maybe there's something else going on. He's probably guilty of some other victimless, may I add, crime. And the police, anybody that runs, they want to chase him because more than likely it's some drug fiend. And that's what happened in this particular case. The guy supposedly had meth on him or some other contraband. That's why people run from the police. That's one reason why people run. And sure, and they should. I mean, why shouldn't somebody run if they're guilty of a crime that harms no one other than themselves? And if they get caught, they'll be even more harmed.
Well, if they did the same thing in Davis, where Richard used to live, the helicopters that you wouldn't be able to see the blue of the sky because the number of helicopters required to enforce laws that all the bicyclists disregard. But the key here is the time of day. I'm not saying that imbibing any kind of drug is wrong, nor will I ever. But very few people get arrested at 6 o'clock in the morning while they're out for a jog or heading to the weight room. It's those wee hours, the staying up late hours, where typically people get in trouble. So you want to avoid trouble. Early to bed, early to rise keeps a man out of jail. Basically.
Yeah, but John, some of us are natural night owls, and so we operate.
Well, the government needs to make that illegal.
Some of us need to operate on those opposite hours, and sometimes you have to be out and running about. And
just make sure you're not on a bicycle running a red light at that time, because
well, hey, at least now if you have a joint in your pocket, you don't go to jail. You have to have something a little more serious, which I suppose is a small favor. But Lord, the fact that we're still putting people in cages because they're hurting themselves is absolutely astounding. It boggles my mind.
Yep.
Oh, and at the risk of sending John here on a bit of a rant, Biden to spend $7.5 billion on chargers that electric car owners won't likely use because they're not in places they're going to use, or the wrong kind of charger. You need adapters. A whole laundry list of reasons that these chargers the government's going to subsidize aren't really useful or as useful as they claim to be. And it's just another part of the grifting game, if you ask me. So,
I won't go on a very long rant. I'll go on a little rant. There's 3 different types of chargers. One that operates on standard household current that you plug your car into, and basically it takes all day to charge. There's another kind that I think it costs about $2,000 to $4,000, depending on where you are and what the subsidies are and everything. And that's and then the kind you want is the kind that costs, according to the news article I looked at, and I think it's probably, their math is a little bit wrong, about $140,000. So there will be no reason for anyone to use any of these chargers unless they happen to put one in right outside your garage, because you want, if you're going to have an electric car, you want to be able to go somewhere and charge it in 20 minutes. And that's why these fast charging stations are draws to certain shopping areas, because you can park your Tesla there and do a fast charge. Many times it's subsidized by somebody else, and then, spend some money and leave. But these things, unless Biden's getting a deep discount on them, which I'd be shocked by, are going to be completely useless to do what their stated purpose is, which is to make it easier for folks to do the things they need to do with a car, which is sometimes drive long distances and quickly refill the energy source. And that's going to be impossible with what he's got.
Yeah, I mean, if you're charging overnight, you can charge it at home, no big.
Yeah.
If you're charging on the road as you're traveling from across the country or around up and down the state, you need to something that will take a lesser amount of time than 4 hours to charge. And the fast chargers do it in
partial charge too, by the way. Yeah.
The fast chargers do it in 15 minutes, which is about the amount of time you need to go to the bathroom and buy a Pepsi and move on. So the fast chargers would make sense, maybe at 140,000, who knows? But the budget allocated for chargers and the number of chargers proposed to be acquired indicate that they are planning on the mid-range chargers, which take 4 hours. Of course, it's probably a situation where they'll actually the budget number will get blown up and they'll get the fast chargers. But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. And then according to the guy who's really popularized electric vehicles and made them, very competitive kind of dream machines with astounding performance and great dependability, except for apparently not all of them are all that dependable, if we ever get to that story. Said that we don't need the government to do this stuff. The government doesn't subsidize gas stations. Why should they subsidize this? The market will provide.
Which is true. There are three private companies out there already that are in the business of building out an infrastructure of charging stations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what irritates me the most is Honda has finally figured out, the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. They finally figured it out. They're actually now able to produce them in mass. And yet, as we do that, now the government's going to go in on electric chargers, when in reality is which one is best is still unknown. For me, the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles seem like a better long-term option than the battery pack vehicles. Now, I don't know that for sure, but we're never going to find that out if the government is subsidizing electric chargers and electric vehicles, the battery powered vehicles. We're never going to find out which one of those is actually a better solution. And there is another issue with these electric vehicles, these battery-powered electric vehicles. A Tesla owner has decided to blow up his Model S instead of footing the $22,000 repair bill for the battery pack. The battery pack went bad. It's after warranty, and it's going to cost him $22,600 to repair it. And so he decided it's not worth it. So he's going to blow it up as a stunt to try and raise some money or something. This notion that these battery-powered cars are some magical solution it's utopian thinking, and I don't understand why we can't get past that part and actually have the full explanation.
Well, in fairness, battery technology has progressed quite a ways since Elon Musk and others have gotten involved in working on it, but it's not perfect. And the guy in Finland who blew up his Tesla because he didn't want to spend $22,900 or whatever it was to replace the battery pack on an older car, is testament to the fact that no technology is perfect. And I think the ideal solution is to let the market dictate whether it's solar powered or battery powered or hydrogen powered or dead dinosaur powered vehicles that are the most effective and the most popular among consumers.
I absolutely agree.
Oh, okay. Well, in a recent article in Town Hall, the title was "No Wonder People and Businesses Are Dumping California." And of course, if you look around California, it's not just expensive and overregulated. It's just operating, just functioning from a business or a personal perspective is insanely difficult. You now can't buy a gas-powered generator for your motorhome. If you a camper and you live in California, you have to go out of state to order a gas-powered generator. We're making gardeners use electric equipment, despite the fact that they're going to have to get like 20 battery packs. It's going to be absolutely insane. And they're just continually regulating essentially the ability to operate out of California. And people are fleeing. California has lost even more population this year than they did last year. So at some point, our politicians and our community is going to have to understand this isn't just people leaving. These are families and communities being ripped apart because our government is essentially incompetent.
Yeah, and California and the media can ignore the fact that there's a cow exit going on, except that finally California is losing a congressional seat because of all of the people leaving the state, and it goes all the way from Elon Musk, who is selling, has or will be selling his mansions in Los Angeles to live in Austin, Texas, but that millionaires leaving the state or billionaires or whatever. That's one thing. Obviously, I think it's what the top few hundred millionaires pay for half of the budget in California. Don't quote me on the exact numbers, but
Top 1% of the taxpayers pay 50% of the taxes.
there you go. That's one problem, but the other problem is the vast middle class, the people who can't get jobs that pay very well, that are just sick and tired of dealing with all of the regulatory agencies. That's where the greatest exit is coming from. The only demographic that's staying are the people who sleep under bridges or otherwise live off the state one way or another, and that's not a viable economic alternative for going forward.
Well, the other thing that the other big section of the other big thing that's causing people to flee California systems while still staying in California is the education industrial complex here that is failing miserably to provide an education for people. And just last week, I think UCD and Sac State and a bunch of others announced that they were going to start 2022 with only distance learning because of Omicron. And so, the decisions that are made here that aren't made in other places, the other places where kids go to school without masks and there aren't vaccine requirements and all the rest of that for kids are attracting people, private schools, which actually, teach people things. It's gotten to the point where it's, at least it's my understanding, that even Michael Bloomberg's going to throw a big bunch of money at fighting the teachers unions in the state of California so that they can start, that schools can start educating kids again instead of the foolishness that they're trying to do with their time. So
if you think about it, it's clear that private education, homeschooling, all the rest works better than public education. Even Elizabeth Warren, back when she was a college professor, figured out that private education was a better deal and supported vouchers. Doesn't now, of course, because that's against the blue progressive or regressive, as you would say, John, credo. But it's obvious for anybody that's looking without political blinders on that we have a failing educational complex, and the only way to fix it is to introduce more competition, which means private education in one form or another.
I'd love to see government schools. I should always have that quote in front of me, Ms. Patterson, but I don't have it, so I'm not going to try to misquote her. I'd love to see government-funded schools compete with other schools on head-to-head. We know from, if anybody watches sports or buys a computer or anything else, competition improves things. Competition improves things. It always has. You want to improve your golf swing, you enter a tournament, you want to just improve anything. We used to compete in classes for the best grades, and the people that got the best grades were the most improved. So
or got put into a gate class, but now gate classes are being discontinued because, well, they're somehow or another white supremacist or Asian supremacist, or that they're not woke enough.
Well, and we also know from management science that the 80-20 rule works. You concentrate, if you want improvement in something, you don't try to take the 80% and throw a bunch of money at them to improve them. You take the 20% that's actually doing all the work, coming up with all the great ideas, making money for your company, and throw training and resources and whatever they want at that 20%, because that has the greatest effect. A rising sea lifts all boats. And once we realize that, we'll get out of the way of these people who are willing to put in the work and have the ability, and they'll help us all.
Yeah, and one of the things we've kind of failed to realize is that competition doesn't necessarily have to be adversarial.
Competition leads to cooperation. You have a more cooperative environment when competition is allowed to flourish.
Yeah, well, I know as gig workers back in the day before California got involved, AB5, and was completely screwed up the gig work economy, is we competed with each other, but we were insanely friendly. We shared tips and how to do our jobs better and how to be better at it, and how we'd actually tell people how to be better at competing against us. We'd share that information along amongst ourselves, and it made all of us better, which made the whole ecosystem better. Our customers were happier because we're all better, and so it all helped. So we competed against each other, but it wasn't adversarial. It was
Yeah, my standard line that I use repeatedly until everybody's bored with it, but I'm going to keep again until you mute me on this one. You don't see Target sending an armed patrol over to Walmart to get customers. You don't see Walmart laying mines down on the trucks that are delivering goods to Target. Because what happens is you can compete on price, or you can compete on service, you compete on the variety of goods and products. There are many places where you can compete, and as those people compete, which they do, in Costco, all the rest of the mass marketers in this country, the big grocery chains, somebody comes up with a better idea, a less expensive way to do something, a way to deliver a better product at the same price, then all the other people have to find out how to match them, or they lose market share. So as James said, everyone gets better. Competition's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to. You can actually compete on moral standing. Like what is Zappos would give away a pair? Was it Zappos would give away free shoes or something? I forget that. Yep. They would give away a free shoe every time you bought one. So they weren't competing on price. They weren't really competing on customer service. They were competing on adding moral value, so to speak, for their customers. They gave their customers something else. And so there's many avenues where you can compete, but because so many of us, when you hear the word compete, you think of it as adversarial, and it becomes this, oh, well, competition is bad because it's adversarial, but it's not necessarily adversarial. Competition is also, as Richard pointed out, it's cooperative. We have about 2 minutes left, so we cover this one real quick. Nicole Hannah Jones, who is a member of that 1619 project, she goes, her quote is, "I think we're going into a dark age of repression and suppression of the truth," which is, now she's correct, just not in the way she thinks she is. She's talking about in education, how education is suppressing her version of the truth, but it is suppressing truth, just not the way she thinks it is. It's suppressing our ability to think.
There's no question that the way that history has been taught for the last 200 years is it's been taught by the victors. The victors of the Revolutionary War were the people that formed our founding fathers that formed the country. And they were the people who laid down the narrative. The victor always lays down the narrative as to why they won the war. And that narrative has been willing to overlook some of the faults, the nicks and the dents in the founding. Not to slavery, of course, one of the largest gashes in our moral history. But that doesn't mean that everything that we have been taught for the last 200 years is incorrect. Most of what we have been taught is correct. It's just that we need to add to that the history of people who have been underrepresented. We don't need to tear down the edifice of what is right in order to add more things which are correct. And that's what the 1619 project is trying to do. They're trying to tear down everything else and put in their own singular version of the truth, but it's not a singular version. It's just a different way of looking at things. And we have to have multiple different ways of looking at things. And that's why this person is correct in saying that censorship is a bad thing. It's cutting down her version of the truth, but by the same token, she's trying to cut down everybody else.
I'm sorry, Richard, but we have to get our version of the truth is we are out of time. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. And please remember to love everybody.
Have a good one.
Thank you very much, James.